Hello. The presentation that you are about to see was given as part of the HEC-HMS calibration workshop. It was recorded on April 9th of 2025, and this presentation goes into the calibration points and zones within HMS. The presenter of this is Simeon Benson of the Fort Worth District. Please enjoy.
So my talk is going to be focused on zones, which we already kind of at the last session before lunch, we were kind of previewing it in the main room here, but we're going to be focused on using zones in HMS to calibrate. So I basically did this, set up this workshop all based on the forecast that I'm running this week for some rain events that we had last Friday. And it's a very slow moving watershed, and so I thought this would be a good time to demo this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So we're going to be working in the Sulphur River here, which is like the northeast Texas, northeast corner of Texas that flows into the Red River. So it's an interesting kind of coordination that has to go on between Tulsa, Little Rock, and Fort Worth District as we all feed into the Red. Or have reservoirs in the Red River. So just really quickly, here's the Met view. So we got 10 inches of rain over, this is one of our lakes, Wright Patman, and then just downstream of it. And we've got 5 to 8 inches kind of all over the place. So a pretty big rain event, and this is mostly happened, I think, in 6 hours. Most of this happened in 6 hours. So it's a pretty intense rain event as well. And then just kind of for your awareness, this is also they call it the piney woods region. So there's a lot of pine trees. It's a lot of thick kind of forest area. So the water can kind of move slow here. Okay, so moving on. It's just kind of background info you might want to know for the calibration later, but for now, we're going to go to HMS and look at the zones. So to set up zones, you're going to need to go to the Parameters tab, Zone Configuration Manager, and then here's where you can set up different zone configurations. So, if you got 3 people on a team, maybe you want to have, I don't know, you just want to break it up a little bit differently. That's something you could potentially work out if you're not passing the same model around. Or maybe I think I was looking at somebody's model earlier. I can't remember if it was Ken or Scott, but one of them had different zones for different parameters. So there's lots of different reasons you might want to have different zone configurations, but they're really easy to set up. Well, I say that you do have to pick it off of a drop-down list. You got to know the name of it. So I actually would recommend if you don't already have a name list, that you might do this alongside yes, or ArcMap or QGIS. So you can kind of visually pick it off and make sure you're picking in hydrologic order and everything. So we're going to go ahead and look at the sub-basin setup that we already have here in Fort Worth. And I'm actually going to, so first thing I'm going to do is talk about the naming convention. So a long time ago, the SWIMS implementation, whoever was setting this up just set it up by gauges, and basically any kind of gauges or lakes. So it's any major calibration point that we're going to want to calibrate. And so they just called it Cooper Lake, North Sulphur River, gauge, whatever. And then HMS sorts it alphabetically. And then the people who set the model up have moved on to different jobs. They've hired new people. And the newer folks don't know where the North Sulphur might be or whatever. White Oak Creek, where's White Oak Creek? So something that I have done as we're moving over SWIMS 3.4 is kind of been taking the opportunity to try to rename the zones. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that for you real quick. So the way we decided to do this in Fort Worth, and you could, there's a lot of different ways you could do this. Second. My voice is telling me I'm talking too fast. Okay. The way we decided as a team in Fort Worth to do this is a hydrologic order. And so I'm basically going to come in here and do rename. And so I'm just going to say 01 Cooper Lake. 01 because, well, you could have done 1 in this case, but since it's alphabetical, if you had a bunch of zones, like on the Trinity River, the Brazos River in Fort Worth, a bunch of zones. So it's really helpful to have that 01 so that once you get to 10, 11, 12, it's still in alphabetic order. So anyway, okay, I'm going to call it 01 Cooper Lake. So it's going to drop it down there for now. That's okay. North Sulphur River. Okay. Rename this one 03 Sulphur River. Talco gauge. Sulphur Dalby gauge. Oh, I forgot 4 Sulphur River. Okay. White Oak Creek is next. So y'all wouldn't know this because y'all aren't familiar, but I'll show y'all in a second how this is going to work. And then Wright Patman 06. So, and then this one actually doesn't have any elements in it, so I could delete it. I'm not sure that that'll blow an error for some reason, so I'm going to just go ahead and rename. I think that is a zone left over from when this model was part of the larger red system. So, so once you do that, you've got your zones named. Then you can go put elements in it. So over in the zone configuration manager, you get elements. This brings up a pop-up window. So Cooper Lake has these 4 subbasins. So this is where it would be kind of helpful if I wasn't constricted to one screen, or if I could bring up ArcMap, and we could look through things. But basically, being familiar. Oh, I could turn this on. Let's see. I could turn on the. So that'll sort of help it. Okay. So, oh boy. All right, yeah. So the South Sulphur, the Middle Sulphur, and then Jim Chapman Lake subbasin all feed into Lake Dam, Chapman Lake. Anyway, so that's all like those subbasins that feed into the lake. Why is it flashing? Since I'm renaming, I've already basically I'm just like reusing the same configuration, so it's already put these in there. But let's just say I'm gonna close that out because that's freaking out. Okay, if we wanted to start from scratch, it would look a lot more like this, and you'd have a bunch. You have all your subbasins in there, and you have to go pick them out and put them in the zone that you want. So that's where it is very helpful to have ArcMap or something, so you can kind of make sure you got your hydrologic order all set up. And then when you add these back, it actually, the order you click them is the order that they go in. And so something to think about. I would love, Matt, maybe if we could kind of organize that better at some point. But anyway, maybe I'll put that in discourse. Yeah, it's a fair for process of zones. Like I said, we like to do this in hydrologic order so that when you pull up that zonal editor, it's all going to be in hydrologic order. We'll show that in a second. But there, everybody has like a different method, and you might, you might want to do it a little differently. That's fine. So if you guys come up with something that works for your team, you don't have to do it the same way I did, but that's how we're doing it here. Oh, this is going to bug me. Oh, why did I do that? Okay. Okay. Okay, so that's just real briefly, that's how you set up zones. Does anybody have any questions? Do you want me to pull up QGIS real quick and show y'all, like,
Well,
That's
Simeon,
helpful having that. Yeah.
would you show too? So I love what you did with that naming convention so that they show up hydrologically. Can you open up a zonal editor so we can you can show them what that looks like now?
Yeah. So exactly where we're headed next. So if we were to go to compute. Oh, my forecast is up. There we go. Oh, it doesn't like that I edited in a forecast, I think. Should have done this in the model setup. Just forgot to switch it out.
Well, you might have to go to the compute tab. And go to your forecast.
And reset this up. Well,
yeah.
It appears to be there. I'll click off and click back. So Ken and Scott were having this issue where these zonal subbasin editors or the global parameter editor wasn't working, and that was because on the compute tab with the forecast that you want to run, you have to set up the zone as a configuration. If you don't do that, then that forecast parameter editor just shows up blank. So if that's happening, we've already had that a few times. We figured out this is how you fix it.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see if that is bring that back. It's not bringing it back.
It's not. You might have to close it and reopen it.
Yeah. Okay. Didn't think about editing. Yeah.
Hey, do you want to talk a little bit about like how you lay out where you want your zones?
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, they are back. I just had to close it and reopen it. Yeah, maybe let me do that. Let me open this parameter table up real quick. Didn't go to the global. I just went here, but oh no. Okay, well so my save didn't take. But this is why I think it's better to list these in hydrologic order, because this alphabetical order, you're probably not, if you're starting out, if you're you're not from here, then you're not going to know where these points in the river are. So that's the bummer. Okay. Yeah, so you can see here, I'm going to take this out real quick. So you can see in the subbasin, we have a lot of different gauges. We have 2 reservoirs. Let me see. Oh, they're turned off for some reason. Okay, so there's 2 reservoirs here. We have Cooper Lake, and then we have Wright Patman. There's a really small reservoir here and here, but they're not core reservoirs, and they basically fill and spill. And I think I sometimes even use them as a calibration tool. But we have 2 major reservoirs that we're forecasting, the inflow in the pool for. And then there's several gauges in the watershed. You can see that's all the red points. We've set up computation points at all the gauges. And so there's a lot of different places in the model that we could break it up. And we chose not to make all of these gauges their own individual zone, because then you would have like one subbasin to one gauge, or to one zone, I mean. So as an example, this middle sulfur has its own outlet gauge. This south sulfur has its own gauge, and a couple other places in the watershed, Cuthand Creek and Anderson Creek, they all have their own gauge. So if you made that gauge its own zone, then you're going to kind of, there's not a, I don't know. I don't love doing that just because I don't want to have a zone in a per subbasin. So I try to do like, I don't want it to be 1-to-1 anyway. So for Cooper, then I've got 5 subbasins, 4, that all drain into Cooper Lake here, South Sulphur 1 and 2. That's these 2 water subbasins. The middle sulfur 1 and 2, these 2 subbasins, and then the area around Jim Chapman Lake. And so that's how that zone is kind of set up. Let me see, as far as the north sulfur, That one's a little bit easier. We're going to have basically 1 and 2, the north sulfur. And then I went ahead and, this is kind of a gut. I don't know that I like this, but this is what the team did. We put the third North Sulphur River as well into that zone. And so, come back. Okay, there we go. If I clicked on that North Sulphur, it actually has 3 subbasins, even though 2 are only drained to that gauge. So, when I start kind of clicking through this here, we'll see the effects of, having extra gauges that aren't reflected in that, or extra subbasins that aren't reflected in that gauge. It's kind of confusing. So this is a point to kind of think about as you're breaking this up. There's a lot of like user preference that goes into zones. Really set the way it makes sense to you as a team. So I think when we did the SWMS implementation, we thought, okay, we'll just put the whole North Sulphur together, even though one of these watershed subbasins is below that gauge. Maybe they thought it all behaved the same, and so they wanted to kind of edit those as a zone. I don't think I was on that one, that SWMS implementation effort, so I'm not exactly sure why they did that, but I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see if anybody's got a question. I'm gonna move this over here. Yeah, so I'll be able to monitor it that way. So let's see. That's Cooper and North Sulphur. So let's go down to the Talco gauge, the third gauge here. So this one again, it has a unique kind of aspect to it. So basically, we try to capture everything that's flowing down into the Talco gauge. That's this point here in the map. I gotta quit doing that because I keep losing my. There we go. So it's got all these subbasins that are draining it, but it's not including the North Sulphur. It's not including down to Cooper, but it does include this downstream gauge of Cooper and this small lake, Lake Sulphur Springs, I believe. So no, it's Big Creek Dam. So what ends up happening when you do that is I end up overriding those, which I don't love to do. Overriding makes it difficult when you open up the next time. That override check is going to stay on, and it's going to bring back the parameter that you were using last time. So if you do it for me, I do a forecast every couple of months on this thing, whenever it rains, basically. So that override can kind of be a hindrance. So I don't love to include too many more areas than you need to in a zone. So it's finding a balance to include everything that's going to probably drain to your gauge or your lake without including so much that you're going to have to like treat a big section of that zone differently. If you're treating consistently a big section of a zone differently, then it probably needs its own zone. So I also forgot to clear my parameters because I've been calibrating. So I'm going to go, I do have them recorded though, so I'm going to go ahead and actually delete this. We'll do, before we go on from here, before I start to move kind of into how I calibrate and work through a calibration, any questions on how to set that up? I know it's kind of a blitz. I don't have like a strict rule of thumb on this. It's just, I try to set it up to where, okay, I have data for these 5 subbasins all drained to this gauge. I want to kind of treat them the same, at least at a high level when I start. And then I might override things on occasion. If I find that I'm consistently having to override things, then I probably want to split them up into a new zone. Okay. Hearing nothing, I'm going to go ahead and override or like get rid of this. Okay. I also want to do one other thing. So earlier I was pulling up the forecast parameter tables here, but I really like the one actually from the CAVI, the combined parameter editor, because that way it has all these tabs and I can just click through them a lot easier. So I'm gonna clear this out. I'm just gonna do my first 3 zones here. So I think anything more than that will probably be too much of a mess. Okay, let's run that. Oh, I shouldn't have run CAVI. Sorry, y'all. It's quick. It's like a 30 or 40 second run.
At least you're not extracting data from Cumulus first.
No, I made sure to get all that done. I didn't need to run the map view is what I should have done that. I already have all that run. None of that changed. Okay. There we go. All right, so going back to HMS. So I'm gonna start here. I'm gonna probably focus on 2 key areas. Cooper, and then that's Talco gauge that's upstream of our other reservoir right Patman. So Cooper Dam, actually, dang. Well, when I started calibrating earlier in this event, it was not looking that good. And really, the only issue is this early stuff. Wow, that's really not bad. So if I were looking at this
You're probably
immediately,
cheating, right?
Cheating?
well, it is cheating a little bit because I already had it calibrated and then I deleted everything out of there. But I thought it would be worse than this. I didn't think it would be this close. I thought we'd have more to do here. Okay, so we're missing on this earlier part, right? Which if I adjust that, it might affect some of this later part, but we'll see. So something else I want to keep in mind though, when looking at Cooper, we have those 2 upstream gauges. So I wish I could share like my whole desktop, but I'm gonna pull that aside for a second. Pull these out. Here's the middle sulfur.
Wow, I
South
wish mine
sulfur.
were looking like that good. I'm telling you.
So these are, yeah. I almost feel like this global parameter editor didn't take or something, because that's hitting spot on. We really only have to, I feel like we have to mess with that initial loss there. So let's go back to the calibration by parameter editor. Yeah, as it took. All right. Oh, the overrides got me. All right, let's take off those overrides and see how bad the calibration looks. All right, I'm gonna bring this in here. Let's run this. There we go. That looks a lot worse. The timing's still decent. Okay, so now we're having, initial rainfall, major initial rainfall issues. There we go. And the overall volume isn't looking too good either now at Cooper Lake. So, I mean, this is a pretty easy, straightforward calibration. You're just going to be wishing that global editor parameter would stay up. And we're going to raise this, obviously. So, I'm guessing. So 2 inches. And so I do know that if I do that, let's see, I've got to pull this down. This is volume. This is a lake. So if I take volume here, it's going to end up pulling all this stuff down later, which I don't want. So I need to raise my initial loss rates, dry out that soil, absorb more of this up front, but I need some of that later rainfall to hit harder. And so I'm going to be messing with the constant loss rate too. It may not be recommended if you're kind of starting out calibrating. I would recommend just doing one parameter at a time. For the sake of time in this though, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to hit both. I'm going to cut this in half actually. I'm just going to say cut that in half. So sometimes I'll just use like a override, set the parameter, especially with soil loss rates, because you can kind of set things, 2 inches or whatever, 0.1 inch per hour, fairly basic. You don't want to do that for Clark transform for sure, because that's where like the size of the basin is going to really affect like your time of concentration. So you don't want to set all your time of concentrations to 10 hours or something. That's going to be really messy. So let's try this here. My model's running fast enough. I've gotten to where I like just hitting that forecast button on the global parameter editor. But we could be doing compute to point there if we were messing up, or if it was taking a long time. So we could let me see real quick, we could hit right click and we could hit compute to point. So something everyone should know, you do have to set this up as a computation point in order to do that. So I'll show you how to do that real quick. Let's say you wanted to make this other lake a computation point. We would just say select computation point, and then that would allow you to right click compute to point. It's a really helpful tool. Okay, but now that I showed you how to do that, we're going to go back to the results here. So now this elevation is tracking pretty well right around the lake. And really, it's just a matter of getting the volume for that second burst of rainfall. So let's go back real quick. Let's look at some of this upstream subbasins. So we're matching pretty well. And then the problem at Cooper is that we're undershooting this big burst of rain that happened on the 5th. Yeah, April 5th. So there's some ways we can try to combat that. You could try to, we're undershooting at the gauge and the lake. So right now I'm not too worried about that. So let's go to our global parameter editor. Combine parameter editor. And I'm just going to keep lowering this. So times 0.3, 0.25, something like that. Seems to go a little slower when I give it a math function instead of just telling it the value. But anyway, maybe it's nervous or something.
Well, one thing to check, Simeon, after this runs, I wonder if you're using monthly average evapotranspiration in the MET model, and that MET model is linked to multiple basin models.
Okay. It's not, but that does bring up something that we should talk about, because we used specified ET, which is what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Okay. I'll check that calibration real quick. Okay. Yeah. So actually, this is perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to use specified ET. So bring this over here for a second. Let's go back to this subbasin. Actually, that's not bad. That one's hitting pretty well. What about this one? Okay, let's look at this one more. So this one, undershooting this volume, pretty well, decent anyway. So one of the ways, oh well, shoot, we're undershooting this volume at this gauge, but we're overshooting at the lake. So I'm basically just going to ignore that. You could really nitpick it and try to match that, but that's just going to be some extra work for you to do because you'd have to counteract that, right? You'd have to dry out. You're going to have to dry out the overall subbasin, but you're going to have to make this one subbasin like wetter.
Hey, Simeon,
that's
try
like-
one thing. Try one thing for me here. I just want to. We've not talked about it yet. So close the graph on the left.
Okay.
And then open your combined parameter editor and the plot that you have for Jim Chapman. I want to see those side by side here.
Oh yeah.
All right, so you got that. Let's see the plot. All right, so now on the left on your combined parameter editor, click on the reservoirs tab. All right, and then here, you see the forecast time tab at the bottom?
Yes.
Right there, yep. All right, and then choose Jim Chapman Lake. There's a gauge there. And set that to yes, the reset to yes. Okay, and now click the compute button, or click apply and then compute. And you'll notice that here, open that plot up real quick.
Yeah.
You'll notice at the forecast time, the reservoir elevation resets to the observed elevation. It made a liar of me. It
So
should have reset. Yeah, it should have reset.
Basically. Oh, that's interesting. That's pretty cool. Okay. I've never used that. That's interesting. It didn't fill this value though. Should it have?
Maybe it's missing at the time of forecast. If the observation's missing at the time of forecast, then it can't fill it in.
Okay, so I'll fill it in here with a close enough value.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to rerun that. I want to see it do that. Oh, that's slick. Okay, I'll zoom in on that maybe. I'll see what it did there. It's pretty interesting.
Can you show the steps for that again?
Yep. So it was the combined parameter editor. And then on the reservoirs tab, and then forecast time. So you can basically, this reservoirs tab allows you to set the elevation of the reservoir at the start time, and then I didn't know this, you could reset it at the forecast time. So it'll make the last gauge reading. But what I did apparently is when I extracted maybe an hour or two recent, and the gauge reading wasn't in and it was missing, so I had to hand enter it. But
so
yeah,
how does that interact with like ResSim or Riverware if you're resetting the reservoir elevation, but you're not changing, I assume, the inflow hydrology? I guess it's a question for Matt. How does that interact with sort of the decision software that wants to know what the reservoir elevation actually is, but you've sort of, overwritten it? I don't know. I'm just trying to piece this together in my mind. Maybe.
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. It's not, and Paul hit it on the head too. It's not going to impact ResSim or Riverware. What this feature is really for is if you're sticking just to HMS, if you want some preliminary results here, and you want to get an idea for what the reservoir stage is going to look like in the future. So there's another option here. You see the method to hold the discharge time series right there. So replace it with the missing using the last valid value, or and that's what's selected right now. So what HMS is doing in that plot, you see the blue line that's just horizontal. HMS just assumed the last value, the last valid release value was held constant in the future, is what I thought it was doing. And so this is just for a quick understanding of how the reservoir stage might play out in the future. If you hold releases or you set them to 0, right? You can set the releases to 0 in the forecast period and then see how the reservoir is going to change.
Okay.
Hey, Matt, I think this may, at least for my watershed, this is broken in the 413.
Which part?
The resetting at the forecast time, the HMS will fail. It won't run.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Alex knows about it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's a pretty cool tool. I like that. But I did want to show y'all how we in Fort Worth we use the ET. So we have basically a script that runs, that sets up a time series for ET, and it just sets up just a gauge with a bunch of zeros in it. And so basically, if I want to, let's see, if I want to set some ET to try to reduce this inflow, or the inflow we're getting from this big rainfall, it is actually pretty constant rainfall, so I'm gonna have to go somewhere like midnight on between the 3rd and the 4th. So if I go here, I can go basically set the ET. Now I can set it to be whatever I want it to be. I'm gonna set it to be like 1/4 of an inch. So this is basically, the way we use this is basically like a time series initial loss rate. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm saying Cooper Basin has 2 inches of initial loss. It's going to have 0.02 inches per hour constant loss. And then at midnight on the 4th or the 3rd, going into the 4th, there's going to be another 1/4 of an inch added constant loss rate. So if we simulate now and watch that plot, this is going to change. There's going to be more. Okay, so it hit this one. I didn't set enough to reduce this one yet. Maybe I should have done a bigger change for the effect so you could see it more clearly. But nailed it. So that was able to bring this inflow down. And now we have that set up. Let me show you all a little bit more how we have that set up. So basically in our MET model, we have set it up evapotranspiration to the specified ET method. Then we had to go to click the specified ET line, and then basically we have, for every subbasin, you have to set a gauge that you have set up for that. So basically we have 4 zones. Actually, we really only have 3 zones, I think, for the sulfur, because one of them is here listed as the Cypress, which is actually a separate watershed we have just south of it. Anyway, so we have 3 zones basically that we manipulate ET, specified ET on. So that is just another way. This is helpful, I find, a to calibrate, a few weeks. I wouldn't want to do this. This isn't scientific enough, if you're doing like a long-term study and you want to simulate a whole year. And if you're doing a short enough calibration time frame, then it's not, or simulation time frame, you don't need to probably get this specific. But sometimes for me, it can be hard to kind of get a clean cut. I might have been able to cut this forecast and start the forecast somewhere between the 31st and the 1st. I want to say I tried and I was having trouble. I think downstream the travel times were longer. So I had to kind of look back all the way to March 25th. And in doing that, I caught a few other rain events, which then made my initial loss, get used up early on. So it was helpful to use that specified ET to kind of reset that loss rate. So you could do more methods like Matt kind of talked through earlier, but we found just for calibrating on the fly that this is a really helpful method. It's not super scientific, but when you're just trying to get a forecast out, it's pretty effective.
Very cool.
So,
Simeon,
yeah.
Do one more thing for me. Close this window.
Okay.
And then click on the MEP model name swims gridded.
Okay.
Yep. And then go to the basins tab.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So that's why you were seeing that slowness earlier on when you were changing something in the zonal editor and hitting save. It took a minute to save. It's because you have this link to 4 basin models.
And I only need it really to at least 1, maybe 2. Do I need it linked to the second one? Anyway, okay, yeah.
So but that'll help you.
So that's something I can clean up.
Yeah. So you're modifying the time series, the evapotranspiration time series. The HMS team did get to like an 80th or 80 percentile completion of a feature to vary certain parameters as a time series. So the example is the constant loss rate, right? Yeah. So you're coming at it from the evapotranspiration. Another way is a time series of constant loss. So you could change that at certain times during the simulation to help with calibration. It's not in a final state yet.
Okay. Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah, I think we had some talks about that a long time ago, and we came up with this as a workaround.
Yep.
Until that was a more official method. So yeah, that'd be really cool if we got that developed.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot more, but there was one more thing I wanted to talk through. I don't know that anybody really wants to watch me calibrate a whole lot more, but I did want to bring up one thing that I often try to talk through with my newer water managers and forecasters in Fort Worth. Oh boy, I got too many open now. Okay, so on the left is north. This tributary up here, and then it drains down into the right plot, which is the Talco gauge. So the Talco gauge is running a little too high, especially early on. And if we put the initial loss back in there, we could eliminate that real easily. But I've had this thing with this event where I cannot hit both of these peaks. I can't hit the volume at the North Sulphur and the Talco. And if I hit the North Sulphur, then it's too much downstream, and vice versa. If I want to get the Talco gauge right, then I have to undershoot this North Sulphur gauge. So, and I know that because there's 2 tributaries. There's the North Sulphur and there's the South Sulphur. But I know that because there's this other gauge there with it's controlling a lot of that watershed, and we're only releasing our release roughly. So I know that those gauges are basically being inconsistent with each other. One of them is giving me, I feel pretty good saying that one of them is probably reading incorrectly. We could really sit here and tweak the model and get it to match both gauges perfectly, but I'm not sure that it's going to be the most hydrologically accurate. And so I just wanted to say, kind of bring that up because I work through this a lot with our new folks. These gauges are good, they're helpful, but sometimes they're going to be inconsistent with each other, and you're going to have to kind of prioritize one over the other. In this case, I have history with this basin, so I know that this North Sulphur gauge is a little bit inconsistent, and this has happened to me before. So I'm going to prioritize this Talco gauge on the right. But that is just kind of the calibration tip that as you're doing more and more of this, you may find that that gauge is it's not reliable, and I need to focus my efforts on. This gauge, or kind of how we're working on the Cooper Dam forecast. Some of these gauges, I couldn't hit these perfectly. So knowing when to kind of prioritize which gauges kind of comes with time, but don't get caught up in trying to match the gauges perfectly. I think that's all I had prepared, Matt. Was there anything else that we wanted to try to hit with this calibration or the zones and calibration?
That's perfect, Simeon. What you showed is, I think, a great segue to let folks take a look at their zones and their projects and their watersheds and see if they want to consider reconfiguring zones and making a plan, right? So if they want to rename them or maybe even combine zones or break out zones, that'd be great. And then add computation points or take away computation points. So I think let's turn it over to the group here. Get 35 minutes at least while we're still as a team. Take a look at your watersheds and make a plan. Okay.
See,
and then
Roberta has her hand up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with Simeon's comment. Particularly if you're getting flows that are a lot higher than normal, those gauges, they may not be accurate at all. I was doing some kind of a simulation on the Arkansas and I'm going, yeah, no, I don't think I can hit that flow. And then a couple months later, the USGS revised it down. So they don't take that real time, even processed, supposedly checked QC'd time series data as gospel, because it isn't. So that's all I had to say on that.
Point. All right. Go ahead and you can find your room. Let's head over to the rooms and start working on your projects.
Thank you very much for your attention through this presentation. If you have any additional questions, would like help, or are seeking additional training, please feel free to check out the links on the screen that are also linked below in the description. If you'd like to stay up to date in whenever more of these videos become available, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and you'll get notifications anytime more presentations or video walkthroughs are posted to this water management channel. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.